You okay?
Hello, everybody. Allow me to welcome a delegation from the University of St. Andrews to Charles University. The University of St. Andrews is again the leading university in the UK, according to the Times and Sunday Times Good University Guide 2024. And Scotland's first university who was ranked top in the Guardian University Guide 2024. So it is the first time that any UK university other than those of Oxbridge has led both major UK higher education league tables in the same year. So we are really glad to have a top university from the United Kingdom here at Charles University. And now allow me to introduce our Vice Rector for Academic Appointment, Jan Kuklík, who will have a welcome speech. So the floor is yours.
So thank you very much. So Madam Vice Principal, dear guests from St. Andrews, dear colleagues from the Czech side, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor for me to say really a few words at the beginning. Of course, we can add that Charles University is the best university in Czech Republic, but of course, it's difficult to compare to be the leading university here in Czech Republic with your position in UK. But I must say that it's our great pleasure to have you here. And when I try to prepare some opening remarks, of course, I recall March of this year when we had the opportunity to visit your university as a part of a kind of a round trip we had in the UK. And when we had the brief of this meeting, we of course realized that the meeting in St. Andrews was for us the most important, and we are very glad that we in 2019 signed also a kind of a formal agreement, but of course we think that the most important is to have the actual cooperation. And for us really this meeting in March was very important because we had really a discussion on points of actual cooperation, and not only to stress that it's important for us and what we can do from the university management point of view. So we also were planning to have something similar here in the Czech Republic for you. We call it St. Andrews Day at Charles University. So it's nice that from the idea to the meeting, it took only several months. So I think that in Czech conditions, this is a kind of a miracle. And also, it's an ideal opportunity to discuss future cooperation. And we are also glad that you can see something from Prague. Unfortunately, I think that we planned practically everything, but the weather is a little bit problematic because there was a kind of an Indian summer until last week. But we still hope that it can improve. So I'm really glad that you were able to come, and I'm looking forward for today's discussions. And I'm also happy that we will start our program with a lecture to say something about sustainability, because this is very important for a program of our rector as well. So it will be very nice to hear your perspective, and of course I think that this is something we think it's important, especially because when you see nowadays world, it's not so optimistic because of the war in Ukraine, because what you can see what happened in Israel and Gaza. And I think that academic cooperations could be something like more optimistic views for today's world. So thank you for coming, and thank you for sharing your ideas with us.
Thank you very much, Vice Rector Kuklik. And now I would like to ask Esther Ruskuc, Vice Principal for Strategy, Policy and Planning from University of St. Andrews for some short welcome.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much, Vice Rector Jan Kuklik, for the wonderful welcome. We are truly honored to be so welcomed by such an amazing, high quality and so steeped in European tradition university. For us, this collaboration is not a piece of paper. This is a practical collaboration, something that we are investing in. You are one of our strategic partners. And we were discussing earlier how what makes a collaboration like this live is also the organic nature in which all our colleagues, staff, researchers, etc. find things in common and further for common good for knowledge and for education. And as you mentioned, we have so many things that we share in terms of objectives, in terms of the way that we want to make the world a better place, the way that we care about Europe, and clearly war in Ukraine and other aspects of what's happening in Europe is something that we all are analyzing, trying to influence and move forward in the most positive ways. In terms of other areas of interest, clearly we have sustainability that we share, but we also have traditional European values in terms of education, in terms of research, and the UK being back in Horizon Europe makes all the difference for researchers to feel that they have, if you like, the framework as well that supports them in that collaboration together. So without too much ado, I would like us to immerse ourselves in today's events and see where we can take next steps and what we can learn from each other, and then decide what is next for our collaboration. So many thanks again.
Thank you very much, Vice Principal, for your kind words. And now we can have first part of our program, which is a lecture by Professor Ineke de Moortel, a Master of the United College. Ineke is a Professor of Applied Mathematics in the School of Mathematics and Statistics. And her topic today is promoting sustainability in higher education, strategies, challenges, and impacts. And it's honor to say that we have both, not only offline presentation, but also stream presentation. So we have a lot of, I hope, a lot of people who are watching this presentation, not only from Charles University, but also from the University of St. Andrews and other people who are interested in this topic. So thank you very much, Ineke, for having this presentation, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jaromir, and thank you very much for your warm welcome. I agree, it's easy to look around the world and think, oh my goodness, it's all crisis. And you know, we all know that sustainability, climate, quite often is linked to the word crisis. But certainly for me, universities are a place where optimism should live. It's where our brightest minds are, where the future generations who will be the leaders of tomorrow and the problem solvers of tomorrow are being educated. So this talk just gives a brief overview of strategies, but also about challenges, because we should be honest that this is a really challenging topic, and the impacts we think we are beginning to make. Having had a look through the Charles University strategy on sustainability, I think there is really a lot of similarity in the kind of concepts and our approach to the sustainability problems. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. Oh, great, thank you. So a little bit about our strategy and our approach to sustainability, some of the challenges we face, and then something about the impacts. Let's see. sorry, it's just being a little bit slow. I seem to have to click it twice. So in St Andrews, we are championing sustainability in a number of different areas. As a research-intensive university, as is Charles University, we're doing that through research, education, teaching and learning, but also our operations. So we're looking hard at how we operate as an institution and how we can improve the sustainability of that operation. This isn't a new thing for us. St Andrews has been doing this for over 2 decades, and I will bring in a few examples of where we looked at sustainability from an operational point of view, from a research point of view, and where there are some new initiatives as well. We are really fortunate with the engagement of our students, and actually led by some of our undergraduates. We have the first interdisciplinary undergraduate program in sustainability, in sustainable development. This was a course developed by some of our undergraduate students called TESSA, Training in Environmental and Sustainable Action, which we now ask all our students to take as they matriculate at the University of St Andrews. And we are looking at the course to see if we'll actually also make it compulsory for all our staff members. It'll probably take a little bit of development, but that's certainly what we're looking at just now. So the engagement of our students right from the start has been really motivating and stimulating. We have clusters of research which naturally lend itself to studying climate and sustainability. We have the Scottish Oceans Institute, and I don't know if, oh yeah, the pointer does work. Just here at the bottom is a picture of the opening of our new building for the Scottish Oceans Institute a few years ago. More recently, we've had Dr. Mette Hai in the School of Philosophy, Social Anthropology and Film Studies, who established the Center for Energy Ethics. So looking at the ethical aspects of the transition to more sustainable sources of energy and all the kind of social implications and societal implications that that comes with. We have other networks, the Genesis Network, the Stacey's Network, which are trying to kind of group interests around sustainability research. If we look a little bit further back at some of the impacts, St Andrews actually launched its own prize for the environment in 1998. And this is an annual prize, and we're just about to bring the finalists to St Andrews in a few weeks' time, where we try and champion smaller projects, pilot projects, but which have demonstrated that they can have an impact and that could potentially be scaled up. But we're very much looking at projects driven from kind of grassroots local initiatives. And we do that every year. There's a small cash prize to help sustain those projects. On a very much practical, operational level, we took the initiative a few years ago. We acquired a site, an old industrial site, a few miles away from St Andrews, where we now have a biomass plant that runs a district heating network. Now, these things are not as common in the UK as they perhaps are in parts of Europe, like here in Prague. And so we have this biomass plant and a district heating network, which now sustains about a quarter of our buildings already. And so, again, there are plans to expand that. We've just opened a solar farm, again on the same site, supported by batteries. So this just to give you, I'll go through this in a little bit more detail, but just to give you an idea of the kind of variety of research, education, and operational initiatives. Sorry. So we produce an annual sustainability report. And I'll show you something about the governance and the accounting structure in St Andrews that helps us looking after our deliveries. But it's worth mentioning that we entered a kind of a national competition acknowledging the approach to sustainability, and that we actually won the Green Gown Award as the Sustainability Institution of the Year, but also specifically for that course that our undergraduates developed on sustainable actions that students can take. Now, when we look at strategy, we firmly believe that it's time to try and start to mainstream green. And these few quotes actually come from an article published or co-authored by our Vice Principal International and Deputy Principal, Professor Brad Mackay, basically outlining that it's time to start mainstreaming, and what for me means no longer opting in. It's no longer really voluntary for our schools, our units, our services to engage with this. It's time we all do this together, and that of course requires central leadership and an institution-wide strategic approach to this problem. And that is just roughly the stage that St Andrews is at just now. So recently we refreshed our university strategy led by our principal, Professor Dame Sally Mapstone. So this is our strategy for 2022 to 2027. And in that we have 5 pillars or kind of strategic themes, world leading, diverse, digital, sustainable, and entrepreneurial. And this allows us to really focus on deliverables and measurables. So this allows us to define objectives, but then also a concrete action plan to make sure we make progress and also to be held accountable for the progress we make. Now you could argue, should sustainability really be an isolated topic in a strategy? Should it not be something that everybody does and looks after in every way that we operate and work and even live our own daily lives? And that's probably true. But by allowing or by making it a specific focus, it means we have to set objectives, we have to deliver an action plan, and we have to be accountable. So for us, this is a way not to isolate sustainability as perhaps your problem because you're the lead for sustainability, so you deal with it, but to allow us to have focus and a strategy behind our approach. So I'm not planning to read all of this out, but you could have a look online at our university strategy. But really, for me, sustainability has to permeate what we do, leadership in education, as well as research disciplines, but also in trying to influence the external environment, policy setting. I'm sure we can come to this in the discussion, but one of the challenges we face is that there isn't really yet a wider developed framework for sustainability on a national or even an international level that allows us to all agree on what we should report, what we should measure, what we should aim for. So influencing that policy environment, for me, is perhaps one of the most important things that as universities we can lead on to help develop what these frameworks look like to make sure we make progress as a society. I think if you talk to many of our academics in St Andrews, one of the things they really find very important is how do we make this a just transition? And the Center for Energy Ethics plays a really big role. How do we make sure nobody is left behind? How do we make sure this doesn't affect some people in different ways than others and leave certain people or certain groups of people really disadvantaged as we make this transition? Now, I don't want to dwell on this, but it might just be interesting, as I mentioned, it's part of our strategy. It means we are accountable. PO stands for the Principal's Office, so that's the senior management team. We report to our university court, which is our senior or overarching governing body, who will quiz us on what progress we make against our objectives. Now, we have recently restructured the way that sustainability is looked after in St Andrews. So myself, together with Derek Watson, our Quaestor and Factor, somebody else in St Andrews with a nice historical title, are the co-leading PO members for the theme of sustainability. And we are assisted by an advisory group. ESB is the Environmental Sustainability Board, led by Professor Sir Ian Boyd. This is a group that slightly sits outside the leadership team, but again helps being that critical friend, asking questions, making sure we are making progress. And then underneath that structure, we have both the delivery team, who mostly look after the kind of operational adaptation that is needed as we go on this journey, and then an academic network to make sure we keep an overview of research and teaching that is linked to the theme of sustainability. Now, of course, the two are not disconnected. They are closely working together so that that operational adaptation is both led and guided by some of the academic and research expertise, but also that some of the operational adaptation goes through into our academic schools and into the way we teach and do our research. Now, before I say something more about the challenges, I also wanted to give you a little bit of our national context in Scotland. We're actually very fortunate in Scotland where we have a really progressive and supportive environment for the topic of sustainability. We have the highest concentration of students in kind of climate or green related subject, and perhaps not quite so much solar panels, but certainly when it comes to wind generated energy, Scotland is an excellent location, and we actually generate a significant amount of energy from renewable sources, up to 100% on a not insignificant number of days now. And Scotland is, of course, still expanding that capability. The Scottish Government has set itself the goal of being net zero by 2045. As an institution, we have challenged that and set ourselves the mission or the target of being net zero by 2035, so a whole decade ahead of the government's target. Now, of course, that does come with challenges. So what I'm going to describe to you is a little bit of those challenges, mostly focusing on our target of net zero by 2035. So, one of the first things we have done, and I'm sure we're all doing as institutions, is looking at our carbon footprint and where those big chunks in carbon footprint sit. Now, I'm sorry, the text on this is a little bit small, but mostly it breaks down into areas of, sorry, I'm going to try and go forward. I might have to go backwards. Okay, sorry, that's better. Of a big chunk in here, this big piece of pie or tart is procurement, things we buy, but that includes also, you know, the sustainability approach of our suppliers. So what's often referred to as those scope 3 emissions. Travel, again, is a really big chunk here. Construction, and in that I would also count things like the maintenance of our estate. And I was talking to one of our colleagues, like Charles University, a big part of our estate is historical core buildings, which don't particularly lend themselves to things like solar panels and double glazing. So having a substantial historical estate is a really particular challenge that universities like Charles University and St Andrews University face. So that is also here, the energy and estate, how to keep the buildings, how to keep the lights on and how to keep the buildings warm. So we split this into kind of small solvable problems so that we can start to tackle these in a very practical way. Now the next slide I will try and talk you through, but it sets out our journey towards net zero by 2035. As a reference point, we are starting from 2015. The different colored bars represent some of those different big chunks of carbon that I showed you on the previous slide. And then the two lines are the kind of important ones to focus. The line here at the top is what we're referring to as business as usual. What would happen if we made no changes to the way we operate and the way we behave? We would see some reduction in carbon just from the changes in technology, the changes in national and international infrastructure. So we're referring that as supply reduction, and that would probably just happen from the evolution and the pathway we are all on. The line here at the bottom, and I hope you can see this kind of steep curve here, that is what we think we can address with offsetting through various nature-based solutions. And of course, there is a gap here between these two lines, And that is where we need to work on our demand reduction. So that is where changes in behavior and changes in the way we operate have to bring down and close that gap. So supply reduction, which we will probably achieve fairly naturally, a reduction in our carbon footprint through the way we operate and changing behaviors. But we know there will be a core carbon footprint that as an institution, to be able to run as a successful organization, we will have to address through offsetting. Now, I know that for all academics, sorry, that's one slide too many. Can I go back? Oh, okay, here. Staff travel, you know, academic travel for various reasons is core. We all came to Charles University. You came to see us earlier because we all know and we all acknowledge that the kind of person-to-person human interaction is really what drives universities. They are places of fundamentally human connections. Research, yes, can be supported by digital means, but that personal connection is still really, really important. So we are looking at ways of perhaps making staff travel more efficient, thinking at, can we use different forms of transport? Can we perhaps be more careful in how we plan our staff travel? So we're certainly not looking at avoiding or eliminating staff travel. We're just looking for changes in behavior and approaches that allow us to reduce staff travel by up to about 30%. Now, that is challenging. It's part of our core business model as academic institutions. It is really important to keep our international and global connections. It's possibly even more important in the context of Brexit, that we keep being an outward-facing university with those so important connections to all our partners. So it is a level of changing approach, changing personal decision-making, but certainly not eliminating it entirely. I'm going to skip the next slide because, sorry, this button is a little bit erratic sometimes. Because it basically is just a different way of picturing that. We're looking for a reduction of about 30%. Interestingly, compared to the pre-pandemic kind of benchmark, we currently have a reduction approaching about 10%. But it's too early to tell whether this is starting that change in behavioral patterns or whether this is a pandemic hangover, that people haven't quite re-established their conference travel, their collaborations, their exchanges. So we're watching that one carefully to see how it kind of impacts our international collaborations and our global network. Now, student travel is an important aspect of our carbon footprint. St. Andrews is, as is Charles University, a very international and globally connected institution. And it really is who we are, having a large cohort of international students and staff, but this focuses on student travel, is what makes St. Andrews and what makes it a very global feeling institution in a very small place in Scotland. So again, we are looking at behavior. We are looking at how our academic calendar actually affects student travel. When should exams be? When should breaks be? How do they align with kind of major holidays like Christmas when people want to go back home? So we're looking at that, but this is also one of the things fundamentally linked to our business model and where nature-based solutions for offsetting will have to be supporting our strategy. So just something quickly about offsetting. We have an initiative called the St. Andrews Forest. And despite its name, this is about much more than planting trees, although that does form part of it because it's a very visible signature of that approach. But we are in collaboration and in conversation with a large estate, a landowner in Scotland, to start looking, for example, not just at trees as a way of offsetting, but also other things like peat. So, Scotland has huge peat, I don't know what you call them, peat areas, I'll just call them areas, which need looking after, which need re-establishing and regenerating, but which are probably a really efficient way also as a carbon sink, so we need to look after them. So we're working with that local estate in Scotland to do that, but also from a research and educational point of view, how can that become a local field station? How can it become a local base for some of our student field trips? What can they learn? What can our researchers do by studying the kind of local solutions, and how can we then link that to some of our international networks and partners? So before I finish, let me just say something brief about some of the impact, some of the key contributions where I think universities can lead the way. Certainly on research, and we will all have our clusters of excellence. I've already mentioned the Center for Energy Ethics, also our Oceans Institute, and starting to look at blue carbon, the incredibly important role that our oceans play, both driving weather and extreme weather, but also as a sink or a source of carbon. Learning and teaching, as I mentioned at the start, we are educating the future leaders and the future problem solvers, but also to prepare them for careers in environmental sustainability and environmentally sustained career pathways, and also to look at how we equip our staff and students and the local community to make personal decisions that are informed on the topic of sustainability. I think I've probably said enough about operational adaptation, and I'm looking forward to the discussion on this as well. So here are a few of our recent initiatives. Some of those I've mentioned already. Again, I don't propose to go through all of this in great detail. Worth highlighting, I mentioned the kind of industrial site we acquired, where our biomass plant is, but it's also where we're establishing a hub for research into hydrogen technology and battery, because we all know that sustainable and renewable energy sources need to come with battery technology to make them really worthwhile as a replacement for fossil fuels. We have recently, and this is, you'll see it, the date on it is January 2024, set up 2 global research centers, and one of those is going to be a center for critical sustainability. Again, looking at rigorous methods of questioning our knowledge and our approach to sustainability. Within the School of Art History, we have colleagues coordinating a global project on museums, supporting the role of local communities and helping local young people address climate change. And then finally, on education, I've already mentioned TESSA, our initiative to equip our students with the right knowledge to make the right decisions. But we're also looking at our curriculum, both from a point of view of what we teach and how we teach it. And then just to finish off, before we have our discussion, just a few initiatives. We have started to look at rewilding our campus, rather than mowing the lawn all the time, letting some of the wildflowers regenerate the environment and support biodiversity. It takes a bit of getting used to, doesn't it? We're all used to seeing neat lawns, and it takes a little bit of getting used to seeing rewilded environments. Our Green Guide supports our TESSA course and gives practical advice on being sustainable to our students. And perhaps not always visible, but equally important, is some of the underlying policies. For example, our sustainable investment policy, where we have made the decision to no longer invest in fossil fuels. So with that, I would like to finish this presentation. As I said at the start, I think there is a lot within our approach and our strategy towards sustainability that is very close to the way Charles University is approaching this. So I look forward to the discussion and further collaboration on this topic. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ineke, for your wonderful presentations. And we are still a little bit ahead of time, so we have a lot of time for questions. So if there are any questions, please, it's time now for the questions. And allow me to have the first question, because it is always difficult, always the first question is sometimes, you know, problematic. So I have one question, and when you talked about your courses for students and even for staff, I was just wondering if the younger generation is somehow pushing the management or the students going to the university is pushing the management into some kind of sustainability. And what is your experience with this younger generation going from the secondary school, if they have some knowledge already from the secondary school and this comes to the university? What is your experience with this?
That's a really good question. And I think, I mean, we've all seen the kind of, I think across Europe, younger people, school, actually very young people, right? And with their Friday school strikes for the climate. And that generation is coming to universities now. So on the one hand, yes, they push. You know, the students develop this course. The students are asking for more skills, for careers. The students are also very willing to look at practical things. We're seeing a lot of initiatives around reducing food waste, so very practical, reducing waste at the end of the year when they move out. They're starting to be much better about trying to recycle things, sharing with local community. So there is a lot of demand, what we eat, where it's sourced. But I certainly find, and you know, maybe this is a little bit controversial, that there are aspects of sustainability that that generation does also struggle with. Have you seen them all send hundreds of pictures from their mobile phones? So there is still, I think, a lot of educating to be done as well. And it's finding the right balance. As these young people transition from being young people to adults, educating them about the different approaches, the different impacts. So we should use their drive and their enthusiasm. And I think this is where I actually think we have a real responsibility to remain optimistic and to show them that there is a route through this problem, because we are also seeing a lot of kind of eco and climate anxiety. And I actually feel really quite sorry sometimes for our 18 or 20 or 22-year-olds, as the word crisis is constantly in their kind of environment. And I think we have a responsibility to support them, to give them a pathway and some optimism and saying, no, you can solve this. But I do find there is quite a bit of educating to be done as well.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. It occurred to me earlier we had a conversation around well-being
Yeah.
and how both institutions are thinking about that, and there is great collaboration in plan. So this aspect that Ineke has just talked about in terms of anxiety and how to equip not just our young people, but also our staff, etc., to sort of take the best positions that they can in the current world and be able to cope with it as well as make a difference. Some of these initiatives around well-being will be really critical in the way that we can support as well as think ahead.
I think one initiative that I didn't put in here, and it's not necessarily directly related to sustainability, is something we're calling vertically integrated projects in St Andrews. And it's something that's structurally quite new, and it's a project that can run for years. It's an undergraduate project, but it can bring together collaborations of students through different years in their degree program from different disciplines, and actually allowing them to work together, people from the social sciences, from the arts and humanities, from the sciences, and getting them to see each other's approach to something as big as the climate problem is a really powerful structure of doing that. It's a way they can work on it for multiple years. They can bring new people in and different approaches, and I think that's really important, both for them to see what are the practical, scientific, underlying data, what data skills do you need, what engineering solutions might there be, but then also what is a just transition? What do we need to look at from a kind of social point of view? And how do we do that? How do we encourage changes in behavior? How do you bring people with you? We all know that just imposing it isn't going to work. So I think that is not necessarily linked to sustainability, but it's a really powerful way of engaging with our students and letting them work through some of those problems themselves. I think maybe some of our staff want to say something a bit more about vertically integrated projects in the conversation later, but it's something that the students really like as well.
Thank you.
Please chip in. It's not just me.
Thank you, Professor de Moortel, for this very visionary, very inspiring lecture, presentation. My question would be, perhaps could you give us some specific examples of pro-sustainability measures that are not very costly, but that have large-scale impact and help to deliver sustainability? Thank you.
Do you want? Buses, yes. I'm trying to think of a few of kind of practical examples. Sorry? Bins. Yeah, bins. Another controversial bin project. It's all those things. I mean, I've already mentioned food. So we all know that we do catering for events like that. Our catering team have started to bring along, yes, the cups and the plates and boxes. And you get to take some of the leftovers with you. Students love it. You know, give students free food. Looking at what the catering is for, because you know our halls of residence will cater for the students. Again, looking at reducing waste when they move out. Bus passes. So we have, I think about a year ago, we have through conversation with the local bus company, have sponsored bus travel to try and reduce the number of cars. We don't live in a capital city, so you have St Andrews in a way is actually quite a rural place, and the moment you go outside the town, you are in quite a rural area, and the public transport network is perhaps not the greatest. But by having the perhaps reduced cost of bus travel, staff are starting to, and students starting to tell us, well, actually, I'm then kind of willing to take the bus. So trying to reduce the number of cars coming in to St Andrews, really strongly in telling our students, saying, St Andrews is small, you don't need to bring your car, you can walk everywhere. That can be a challenge because people feel like they need to have their car to have their freedom. So by doing that kind of through the sponsored bus travel, yes, bins, recycling, making people think about what they chuck in the bin. So all these kind of practical approaches, and we're starting to have more and more conversations now with our schools and our units as well, saying, think about what you do. Do you need to print this? And it can be really small things. All the printers now have a little bit telling you what it costs to print. What I would love to see is not just what it costs, but the carbon footprint of printing that bit of paper. Do you need to print it or do you not need to? So I think there are small things, and it's still a lot about awareness raising and giving people the right tools and information to make decisions. Stephen.
Yeah, I'd better get the microphone. Thank you. Can I just add, just on the bus travel that Ineke mentioned, one thing that we did in terms of, and Ineke's talked a lot about the culture. That's a really difficult thing to do because we're asking people to do things slightly differently from the way we did in the past, and that's always going to be a difficult thing. So one thing we did with the bus travel, for example, that Ineke mentioned, is that we gave a 75% discount with a deal with a bus company. The bus company covered some of the cost. We covered some of the cost. In the greater scheme of things, it was expensive, but not so expensive. And actually what we found with the shift from the car to the bus was the most important thing for people often wasn't the environmental impact, but was the cost of living impact. So when you have a cost of living crisis, which we have in the UK, but actually it's a Europe-wide cost of living crisis, price of fuel. It was to tie it in with people's, so we were able to help staff with the cost of living crisis, which had the happy and it wasn't a coincidence, but the double objective of also reducing our commuting emissions as well. So if you can tie it into people's day-to-day lives, which I'm sure you do, and as Ineke said, we're not right in the middle of the city with a really good public transport network, but we do have some good bus networks because it's a rural area. Thank you.
Yes, so I was just going to add a little bit to that from the point of view of how it interacts with daily lives and what it is that we make that is a little bit uncomfortable but helps us along the way. So, for example, the bins that Ineke talked about, we removed the bins from everybody's office, which means that we have to think about what we do with the waste, You don't leave it lying around, so you don't produce it as much. And also you have to take it to certain places to throw it away. Now that did two things. Obviously, it made us first feel, why do I have to do this? But it also now makes us feel, well, actually we've created some cleaning capacity, and some of that cleaning capacity can be spent elsewhere, for example, in our library to clean the racks a little bit in more detail or something like that. So often these stories that we can create around what we might be able to do in addition to the discomfort that goes in part of the change can help us along that journey. I'm not saying that as a result everybody will be positive about it, but it helps us a little bit move forward with some of those initiatives. And then we have car share arrangements in place for those who cannot use the bus, for example. We also, in our sports clubs, students do attend sports fixtures, and there are a number of vehicles that our sports clubs have. Those vehicles can be rented now by staff as well if they are going on business travel, and there is more sharing ongoing so that we have fewer vehicles as part of the university fleet, and that there is less renting and hiring outside the institution. So these are some very small level practical examples, but I cannot overstate what Ineke talked about when it comes to having information for people. So our schools are asking for their energy usage, which is, as Ineke said, quite hard in these old buildings. We don't always have the way of measuring energy usage for every building. We will have 1 meter for a whole street or something like that. And there is an opportunity to create a bit of competition between our schools and departments if we were able to just show them what they use in terms of heating or electricity, etc. And I'm pretty sure that people will come on board with that. So these are some of the aspects of practical life that we are exploring. And there are other bigger policies that Ineke also mentioned. But we feel that things need to go hand in hand, because if there is no activity, just big ticket items, then that anxiety grows and the feeling grows that nothing is happening.
Thank you very much. Do you have more questions?
Maybe I can take it. Ineke, maybe just a question regarding your personal point of view, or let's say evaluation of your governmental funding for these green initiatives. Because, for example, in our case, the European Union is covering a lot of activities under the green umbrella, and maybe some people feel that it's the only thing that there are some money issued for in the European Union in the last years. So what's the case in Scotland? What's the case in Great Britain? How would you perceive this situation, the amount of money that's being actually allocated for these green activities?
It might be one that Stephen is in a better position to comment on than I am. I think certainly there's a lot of challenge there. One of the aspects we were recently discussing is our National Research Council has brought out a draft of a concordat, and kind of high-level principles that we think we can all support. But again, we are a long way away from our capital city. We are quite a long way away from, again, the really interconnected public transport network. So there's a real challenge there in cost. Quite a few of us were complaining earlier about, the cost of rail travel in Britain. And how is that going to be supported? If you are close to other universities, then yes, you could choose to take the bus or take the train. But the reality is that it's cheaper for us to fly to London than take the train. And that is really difficult. So if we are going to have a national policy, say within the UK, we're asking academics to no longer fly. Well, that's okay if you're based in Oxford or Cambridge or London, which are an hour away from London by train. But if you're based in the north of Scotland or the north of England, this is becoming both a logistical challenge, because quite frankly, let's be honest, the train network isn't that great, but also a financial challenge. And how we address that in a way that's fair on a national level to keep the same opportunity for competitiveness is one that is, I think, a really difficult, and that is not a conversation that we're quite having at that level yet. I already mentioned the kind of cost of greening a historical estate is very different from, kind of retrofitting, say, a 1990s or a more modern estate. So I don't know if Stephen wants to comment as well, but it's certainly a challenge. I'm sure all of us will go to budgets.
So this is, sorry, I know we've got people online. It's a really good question. I think, so there are a number of challenges with sustainability, and we could talk about the work that we're doing, and we are doing good work as a university, but because we're based in a rural part of Scotland, that's great in some ways because it's a destination, so if you come to St Andrews, you're not going anywhere else, so we've got you. And you're there and you're very welcome, and it's a nice place to visit, and there's a really good sense of community. So let's always talk about the positives first, but it has its challenges. We know that it can be more challenging to come to. It's worth it, but it is more challenging. And I think the point that Ineke makes, this is part of just transition. Yeah. In the same way that, one of the issues that we have in Scotland, and particularly our part of Scotland, is, let's take an example, how do you make the transition from the oil and gas industry, which sustains jobs in some rural and remote areas whereby there isn't a huge amount of diversity in the workforce? Similarly, we think about bus travel. Well, one of the reasons we introduced the bus travel is that we know not everybody has access to trains and has access even to cars. So in a rural area, it's about that. That's the whole principle behind just transition. We don't get it right all the time, and it's one of the reasons why we have such excellent work going on from our colleagues on just transition and energy ethics as part of our research work at the university. But this is a real challenge. And on national policies, well, climate change has devolved in Scotland, so it's a responsibility of the Scottish Parliament rather than the UK Parliament. But there is a challenge when we don't have, the UK is one of the few countries in Western Europe without a high-speed rail network. And believe me, if we start to tell people that you cannot fly to London, then that would create challenges for people with caring responsibilities who are maybe time poor. So how we get that right, I think, is something that we're still thinking about, but actually we are in conversation with colleagues from universities throughout the United Kingdom on that. And I'll pass over to Esther.
So I'm going to link up a little bit with both Stephen and Ineke. So sustainability and the work towards climate efforts is a devolved matter, as Stephen said. So Scottish Government is really focused on that. There are obviously a certain amount of limitations as to what it can do, but it is a high priority. So it means that some of the funding streams are incentivizing thinking as well as doing, in terms of projects and in terms of investments into the environment. So on our Eden campus, we have government or co-government funded initiatives, such as some of the infrastructural investment at the Eden campus. Our Eden campus is a development as part of a Tay Cities deal, funded mainly by the UK government, but also partly by the Scottish government. In terms of institutional funding, so universities are getting various streams of funding, probably as here as well, but quite a chunk of it for us comes from the Scottish Funding Council. And Scottish Funding Council has also set up sort of a really preferential way of loaning money for universities into environmental investments, and these tend to be capital type investments that help with either district network heating or, for example, refurbishing buildings in a way that is more sustainable. It is a bit of a bidding process, but those that are favouring or progressing the sustainability agenda have a much more chance of succeeding as part of that. The research councils are now also having initiatives and calls that are related to environmental research and sustainability quite broadly, or the UN Sustainable Goals. So those things are proactively and openly called for and favoured as part of some of the work that is ongoing. So as part of our accountability to Scottish Government and the Scottish Funding Council, we have to write about, for example, the research and how we use some of the money that is given to St Andrews for the research to address some of the UN sustainability goals or the climate crisis. So as an institution, we have to be very clear how our social responsibility and environmental responsibility comes through in the work that we do. So there is an outside policy framework that supports that. And as Ineke said in her presentation, Scotland has it as a high priority, and the conditions for progressing environmental matters are very good, and that's why she had that 80% in that big green blob on the picture. So some of what we are all talking about informs that sort of environment.
Thank you for the answers very much.
Yeah, I think just maybe to round some of this up, I mean, it's a hugely complex question. But for me, it's perhaps one that really highlights that this isn't just a science and engineering problem. And this is where I think as universities, particularly in the arts and the social sciences, our academics have such an important role to play in helping guide us through this as a society. And I really work quite hard to help our staff see that there is a role for them to play, and not just to look towards the science campus and hope they somehow fix this, because they won't. Because as we go through this, we need guidance as a society, and that has to come from our social sciences and arts research experts. So,
also speaking of research and funding, I think that a great opportunity is Horizon projects and organized through...
Sorry.
So we've been building like 5 consortium recently, and you're all invited to join. So those consortium are built on new Bauhaus initiatives. So this is something what supports a strategy that supports green transition in our societies. So obviously because we are focused on digital heritage, we've been focusing recently on dissonant heritage, but new European Bauhaus has many different aspects of interest. So yeah, if you would like to join one of our consortium that is like focus on climate change, you are like more than welcome to contact me after this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have exactly 11. So it's time for a short break, for a coffee break. And for those who are watching us online, now it is the end of the first part, and you will need to use a second link to join us in 15 minutes for a second part, which is called Academic Synergy, in which we will have some successful collaboration. Then we will talk about the possibilities for cooperation. And last, there will be a hybrid forum, so the faculties have the possibility to ask or add something for us on which we can collaborate in the future. So now we will have a 15 minutes break, and I'm looking forward to meet you after the coffee break. Thank you very much for your for all of you for your presentation and your views on sustainability. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much.